Really excited to have you on. Peter, welcome. First one.
Thanks for having me.
What a topic. We were just staying there off before we start recording how unique, I suppose, this whole situation is. So take us down where you've been working on it and your thoughts on it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying before we came on that this is really quite a strange topic in a way because it's really time sensitive. It is very much of a moment, and some of the people who are on this webinar may never use these ideas because you by the time you go back to actually coaching, the rules might have changed. But for some people, these are exactly what's happening right now. So it's unique, and I'd say it's certainly something that who's actually an expert on this? No one. So anyone could be presenting on this. It just so happens that I put something out there and Gary saw it, and here we are. Speaking of the stuff that we put out there, I'll start the presentation. Hopefully you should be able to see that. Is that on?
Let me kick it off and make sure we saw the last time.
There we go.
Very good.
So on social media, probably started about a week ago, I started to put out some ideas for social distancing based practices. I wasn't the only one. I noticed a couple of people who were also doing that. Pete Novikowski and Stuart Blake. I approached them and said, would they be interested in putting together this little booklet, this little presentation? They said, yeah, sure. And in the meantime, Gary had approached me, so it was perfect to present. And it's so unusual, as I've already said. Quite a few people are thinking, how exactly are we going to go back? What are we going to do? And the easy option would be to go back to isolated linear practices with just two people knocking a ball to each other and not much movement, or fitness related work. But we want more than that, because how long can we sustain that? How long will the players actually be interested? And there's always going to be trade-offs in no matter what we do. And now it's going to be even more so. What we do is going to be far from ideal. We're going to lose perception, action coupling, ideas about constraint-led approach, teaching games for understanding. But can we still have practices that look like a moment of the game that will transfer and that people will engage, or players will engage in and enjoy? I'll skip past that one and go straight in. So there's 2 pages here that were provided by Pete Novikowski, and what he said, his thoughts were, can the sessions be fun? Can they be safe? Can they be inclusive? And also he sees them as a starting point, and can the players add their own twists and takes on things? So can they develop and evolve as the practices take place? The practices here are essentially around ball mastery, takes on rondos, some shooting as well. If I move on to the next page, you can see the shooting one. And I think that actually we've got quite a good opportunity to do some shooting-based practices, but we might otherwise not do. I think a lot of the time, coaches find it difficult doing shooting practices without getting large numbers. And how often do you see such a large queue when it's a shooting practice? We can't really have large queues because we've only got 5 players plus a coach. So shooting is something that we can really have a look at. Just to say, I don't know how well you can see these on your screen right now. Gary has got the presentation, so he can send that out to you if you want a closer look. So those are Pete's practices. Moving on to Stuart's practices. And he said to me that his thoughts were, can they be fun? Can there be some addition of fitness, but not just running, as we talked about? Can the players get lots of touch of the ball? Can there be an element of competition? Can there be pictures painted for the players? that will transfer and translate into the game. And the final question that he asked when creating these sessions was, would he want to be involved? And one of my colleagues who I work with is a former Moroccan international. And one of the things he always says when he's looking at a session is, would I want to be involved in that? And it's one of the thoughts that I also use. So when you're looking at something for your players, I would definitely ask that question. If it's something that you think, I'd probably get bored, so will the players. And if we look at the practices, these ones are more the moments of the game. In the next slide, we've got football tennis style games, which I think link more to the fun aspect. And they may not necessarily be the most transferable when you think about the game, immediate transfer, but I always think back to when I did script writing and screenwriting, and every scene, I was told, had to move the story forward with one exception: if the scene was funny. And to me, if the sessions, particularly in these circumstances, are fun, then they are more than fulfilling their function. Just moving on now to my section here, and my approach was slightly different. Pete and Stuart both came up with essentially new sessions. I decided that I didn't want to create brand new sessions. I wanted to adapt already existing sessions. For those who don't know, I've written a couple of books about 3v3 football coaching. I say 3v3, but it's not just about 3v3. It is small numbers sessions. So groups of 6, which means that these practices can translate and transfer with just a few tweaks. And I think that's quite important when you're thinking about your designs or what you go out and do with your players. It doesn't have to be brand new. You've probably got sessions and practices that you really enjoy or are your go-tos, and the kids or players really buy into them. And just a few small tweaks, you can get a practice that you will be able to use in these circumstances. The first one here is something I call a crisscross, using the ideas of interference. So the players crossing each other's paths, having to pick out the gaps to get the ball across, looking for technical actions, but also some of that perception action coupling that I mentioned earlier, that observing and seeing. On the next slide, diamond passing. This is more along the lines of those set movements and what some might call automation, but we're looking for triggers. I include in there some little movements, check movements away from cones. It's not as realistic as it being against a player, obviously, but there is a place for it, and this might be an opportunity to practice that. Finishing and goalkeeping, shooting-based practices, changing the areas, and I've included 6. It can be 5, as we see in the other section. Just be creative about how you use the areas. Give players a chance to enact or enable them to practice their finishing, basically. Get your goalkeepers involved as well. Just going to move on again. The free player finishing and basic moves is linked towards the creation of pictures, 1-2s, overlaps, while also still observing the rules. And that's the difficult part. Can you observe the rules, but at the same time, can you get stuff going on that is of use for the players? Final one here, I think, positional defend and attack. This one actually is a kind of a combination of practices. You look at elements of a rondo to a degree, where you're avoiding the player or central players and moving the ball quickly, but also that central player, can they read the cues? Can they quickly score once they intercept the ball? So we actually included an element of transition within the practice. And actually, if you think about it, if you in the UK, we've got a 2 meter rule. Actually, 2 meters between defenders is quite a good guide for something like this. So we could use that to our advantage. None of these ideas are perfect. I don't think any ideas will be, because we've got to make the best of what we have. The elements of time, space, pressure, they'll be removed because we can't use them. We can't have people going in and applying pressure because they're against the rules. And priority number one has to be, can we be safe? Any sort of pressure, it might end up being artificial with a time limit or something of that type. The cues that we look at might be different too, but there'll still be opportunities for players to explore, to get repetition in. There is still some decision making. Can we engage with them by making it interesting? Hopefully more interesting than just running up and down in lines. And I also think, don't underestimate just being back for the players. There will be some frisson, some engagement immediately just because they're back in action. And that's something important. But we've also got to try and keep them in it, because that will only last so long too. If we lose them, then, well, then hopefully we're not going to be in a position where they don't come back again. But it's always a possibility. It's not going to be perfect, as I said before, but we can still give them something good, something enjoyable. And if we can involve an element of competition, that will help them too. And yeah, that's it for the presentation part, Gary. I don't know. I'll stop the slideshow and put you back on.
Perfect. Yeah, there's some good topics there to go into. We'll just wait. We'll probably get a few questions starting to come in now from coaches. The aspect of fun, do you think this, if we approach it with that lens, do you think coaches have a responsibility now, with the players being away for so long, that they actually have to make the experience to keep the people enjoyed, because they must be dying to get going?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. I mean, I remember lots of people putting out the tweets. What are you going to do with your players as soon as you come back? What's going to be the first thing you do? Oh, we'll have a game. We can't, unfortunately. And it would have been the easiest solution, wouldn't it? What's the most fun thing for them to do? Let's go and play. They can't play. So what do they enjoy most next? Probably scoring goals. So I've tried to put practice in there that involve goal scoring, because I think that's what engages them. I remember watching some Pep and Linda's stuff where he talks about scoring goals makes the players fly. So can we get them to fly?
That's one that I think is so like the way that we leave out shooting and all the exercises, and then we complain that people get disengaged and they can't keep their focus. I mean, you've got goals in even the little rondo objectives as well. Do you think the challenge as a coach is for that, the creativity almost more than it is for like the conditions?
It's going to be a combination of both. I think of, Lars von Trier, the film director, Scandinavian film director. They use a style of filmmaking called dogma. I can't remember what the exact pronunciation is. And what they do is they apply rules. So they take away things that they're not allowed to use to try and help inspire their creativity. I think we're in that situation. We've had things taken away. So that means we do need to be more creative.
Yeah. The one that you would take away, which as a director of a club, would you be supportive for a coach or to say, like, okay, when you're back, here's a set of ideas. What I would not like you to do is isolated running exercises, those linear passing for more than 10, 15 minutes. Do you think there should be in the coaching community, there should be someone that's saying, there's a time limit on what you should be doing with almost practices that may disengage people.
I would hope that's not needed, but maybe
it's needed, all right.
maybe my opinion of the coaching community is higher than it should be. I do think, to me, it should be quite apparent and quite obvious, especially under the circumstances we've had. Kids have had, or players have had, quite a lot of time to run. They could go and do that on their own. They haven't had time or an opportunity to kick a ball around with their friends. If they're lucky, they have brothers and sisters or members of the family where they can kick a ball around in the garden. But some won't have that. They'll be only children. Some might not even have a garden. So I would hope that coaches won't think, oh, yeah, we'll do running, because they're here to play football. I think that during normal circumstances, they're here to play football. Okay, it's different if you've got 5 sessions a week. It does become different. But if you're working with kids, how often do you get that? You're talking maybe an academy. Even then, it might only be 4.
What do you think of the coaches then, the role in terms of communication in this? Do you think alongside that, do you think coaches should actually remove themselves and in those situations? Like, those are some, and I watched that with that through that lens of, I would actually enjoy being a player in those exercises. What I wouldn't enjoy with a coach standing beside me, kind of getting their passion going again and probably overstepping the information level of what they. I mean, do you think coaches should maybe catch themselves with their information, or do you think that's just a process of getting back in there?
I would always verge on limited information. There's plenty of research that suggests that most of the time that information doesn't actually have any impact anyway. And then there's other research that says that when you're using that level of explicit instruction, it breaks down over time. So it might have improvement in a short time scale, as in within the practice, but over the long term, it's shown to not be as effective. So I would always go for less rather than more. An old phrase there, less is more. I noticed in the question someone mentioned about 6, we can only work with 5. Well, the coach can be one of those players in the practice. That's a way to engage the players. Most of the time, the rules and things around coaches not getting involved is normally down to safety because of the contact. If we're not going to have contact with the players and all we're doing is passing the ball or playing or dribbling, then why don't we get involved? Isn't that a way of engaging? I'm not suggesting we do the shooting practice and start nailing the ball at the under 11s. But if you're working with a group of adults or 17s, 18s, I don't think it's a big problem at the moment.
Patrick has asked, what are your thoughts on pattern play with appropriate spacing and numbers?
I think it's fine. I think we've seen elements of that. The only questions worth asking are, how old are the players? How engaged will they be in that sort of exercise? And based on that, there's probably going to be a time limit on how long you can do it. But it's your players. You'll know whether they'll do it.
We spoke about this one before, just started recording. Any ideas on when players don't share the ball, they're all in a separate square, they're doing their footwork, the Corver stuff? What's your thoughts on that?
It's that time scale thing again. They may have missed playing football. They probably haven't missed half an hour toe taps in a square. There'll be a place for it, obviously. There's always a place. There's a place for everything. There's a place for everything. And it depends on how long players will buy into it and are willing to buy into it. That when you talk about working in a square with a ball, they could do that at home. I believe Tom Byer might have written a book or two about that. Working at home, just dribbling with a ball in a square. Your front room's a square. It's quite a big square, but it's a square. So, yeah, sure. But how long are your players going to buy into it? That's the question.
You think engagement is a big priority then as the coaches then start? I mean, because you don't know how long you're going to be. You could be in this here. You said at the start you could be in this going 1 week to 2 week to a month. So you don't know. So you probably want to prioritize having the players want to come back at the youth level rather than their technical development at this stage.
Yeah, I think right. I always, if you're a grassroots club, your priority is to keep them involved and keep them engaged. Like, don't be their last coach. Don't put them off for life. And if you do that, that would be the ultimate failure. I think the ultimate failure would be they come to my sessions and they never want to play football again. I've done something very wrong. So we've got to engage them at all times. And I think now, even more so, because are they there to see you? Have they missed you, their coach, or have they missed their mates? Have they missed playing football with their friends, kicking a ball around with their friends? And I think that's the answer. That's what they've missed. They're not coming to see me.
Well, if anything, with all these Zooms, they're fed up with seeing the coach.
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. Can we get out on the field and kick a ball around with our friends, please?
Can we get away from the computer? Lee has asked, how long do you think sessions should last in order to optimize player engagement?
Difficult. Really difficult. Age is going to be a big factor. Before we came on the air, we were talking about, or I was talking about, I honestly haven't got a clue how you would do a session for under 7s and under 8s at the moment. You might get them to buy in for 20 minutes, if you're really lucky, half an hour, but they're going to want to play. And how do you say, I'm really sorry, the rules say we can't? And you got to tell them that, and they're not going to be happy. So really tough with those age groups. But if you're talking about adults, you could probably do an hour and a half. You might even be able to do 2 hours if you really wanted to. Probably 2 hours is probably too long. But I would, if I was organizing a session and organizing a length of time from under 10 upwards, I'd probably be aiming for 45 minutes to an hour maximum. I think any longer than that, you just got to think about how engaged they will be, how many practices you're going to burn through in that amount of time. So you did 3 practices for 20 minutes each, you might be okay. But again, who's to say these work with a group of players? Might work with one group, might not work with another group. So you put it on, you stick it in, and nothing happens. Okay, well, I better ditch that one. Move on to the next one. Right. How many of these practices can we go through in one go? So, yeah, I'd probably say somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour, under 10 up, maybe under 9. It's just that concentration level.
Let's talk about the process, because you mentioned that you wanted to make sure that you didn't start from scratch in your session design for these here, that you used your book as a reference.
Yeah.
Talk about the thought process behind the design in the books.
Oh, the books. Wow. Well, the 3v3 concept is mainly to do with gameplay more than anything else, which is what's been taken away from us. We can't play the games. And it was simple maths. If you got one ball between 6, that individual gets more touches, or each individual gets more touches versus one ball between 4. And then 3 was also the smallest number we could have that allowed us the basic shape of the game, which is triangles plus overlaps, third man runs, etc. And all of the elements of the game, or most of the elements of the game, could come out in that small-sided format, with the little trade-off against 4v4 where you get more touches per individual. And I'm not ever going to say don't use 4v4, don't use 5v5. That's not the point. The point is, can you get the most out of 3v3? And within those books, it's not just about the gameplay, it's also about small-sided practices as well, or small numbers practices. So I've got these games already, these 4 and 2 where they're in zones, or that crisscross practice where they're moving across each other. And I just looked at them and gone, well, I can adapt that one. I can adapt that one. I can adapt that one. And I had 5 practices that I adapted 3 times each. And I was probably 30 pages into the book. I'd had that many already. So I could have kept going, probably got 15 to 20 adapted practices out of it, because they're already set up for small numbers.
You're going to get this as well then. What ages would you, or you've got, what ages would you, do you start that program in? People always ask, is there a starting age that you can start, but what age would you stop at? Is there an age that it's limited to? Do you think it goes up to 14, 15, 16 seniors?
Interesting, because that's what I'm doing my research into my master's project. Currently interviewing coaches to see what they think. To me, you can use it with all age groups. You can use it with adults too. It's just a case of how you use it. So with younger players, the whole practice, the whole session might look like small-sided games, might look like 3v3s. Whereas as they get older, it might start to look like, okay, so our topic today is we're going to try and play forward or penetrate into an end zone. So we'll start off with 2 3v3s doing that, and then we'll join them together to make a 6v6. So you can lead into it in that way. I've also asked coaches the question, when would you use it? So it's come back a few people thinking for the older players pre-season, because there's been quite a lot of research into heart rate and beats per minute and how hard they are working in those 3v3s. It's actually quite high. It's higher than 4v4 and 5v5. So as a tool for fitness, it's quite useful. So you can use that with adult players to work on their fitness levels without doing running.
What changes do you think, coming out of this whole period, and there's time away from players, time away from teams, time away from each other, more reflection, perhaps more like creativity in terms of staying connected with Zooms and stuff like that there. What trends do you think are we going to start to see over the next couple of years with coaching at all levels?
I think there's definitely been a move towards games-based practice. I think we're still going to be in this war between, opposed and unopposed and isolated practice. We're going to have people still locked, and I don't know how long that's going to go on for. It's great because I've spoken to a lot of these people who are involved in the clashes individually, and the people who support isolated practice also support playing in games. they just believe that there's a place for isolated practice. Whereas those who are generally more games based say there's not a place for isolated practice. But then if you dig into what they're explaining, when they talk about games based and moments of a game, that doesn't have to be a game. It can be some form of, I'm going to use the word drill. So they're not as far apart as people imagine. And there is no one right way. I think that's key. And I think that's also very true of what we're talking about with these practices for social distancing. I don't think there's a right way. You can get the exact same result out of two completely differing or seemingly differing methods. You know your players best. You know the circumstances. You know the context that you're working in. And that's the most important thing. And at the moment, our context is we're not allowed to touch each other. We have to clean the football. If we're not cleaning the footballs all the time, which I think is going to be or nigh on impossible, we're cleaning hands regularly and constantly. We're sticking to those rules as much as we can for their safety, for our safety, and for everyone else's safety. Totally different context to normal times. Should we ever get back to normal times? We'll see.
Lee has asked about setting up when you're putting those sets together. Is there a few games going at a time, or are you setting it up in advance? Or are you giving them rest before the next exercise?
I've seen some really good stuff. I can't remember who posted it. They posted a picture of a pitch, full 11v11 pitch, and they quartered it. So each quarter was a practice. So you had group of 5 plus the coach, group of 5 plus a coach, group of 5 plus a coach in each quarter. The bit that I have to admit I'm not entirely sure of, but I think you should be okay, is that whole aspect of shared equipment. I think as long as nobody is handling the cones regularly and they're just left there and the coaches can pick them up at the end, I don't see a problem moving around in a carousel. But if you've got just your group, I always think that as long as you can set up the same practice in the same area, then just carry on. You save time, or picking up 1 or 2 cones and adapt. And that's the same in normal circumstances.
Taylor, sincerely hope we're not be prepared to make adjustments. Yeah. Hopefully we're not in this situation again. But do you think, just based on Taylor's point there, do you think that if this ever arises again, can coaches have something in place that could actually? Because I remember when this kicked off, it was we had Aberdeen were on with their director of coaching. And he was talking about, and it was all isolated, get the players these workouts, these individual workouts. But they were like, well, yeah, we're getting them out, but we basically already have, it's part of our process. So it's not a whole different, do you think aspects like this here are more easily transitioned when we're away with players? Or do you think that we probably have we learned to maybe overvalue our impact as coaches when we're with the players, perhaps?
I think we definitely overvalue our impact on players. Absolutely, I'm afraid. I think I'm an all right coach most of the time, but I see it as we give them a platform to express themselves and develop, and we can help them when they want help, or give them help if we see it. But a lot of it's going to be them, and by engaging with them and encouraging them and helping them want to get better, or even if they don't get better, just keep playing and hopefully through that process of playing and repetition and pictures and so on, they will improve. But sadly, I've seen plenty of coaches who have gone, I've got some really good players here, I must be a good coach. How long have you had those players? How big of an impact did you really have on them? It happens. So we can very often be guilty of overthinking what our impact is. The more sessions you have with a group of players, obviously, the more impact you have. But if you're a grassroots coach and you've got one session a week and a game, what are they doing the rest of the time? You might have some impact or influence on that if you are giving them homework practices and things like that. But even if you're giving them that, are they doing them? Who knows? Some might be. Most of them probably aren't, let's be honest.
Yeah, we do never know. Like with all that, that's what has blown me away. Not blown me away, but what has kind of made me think when we're doing all this is like, obviously, if you have a Zoom, you have to take a picture of it. Like that's just part of. If otherwise, it didn't happen. But like, how many players are actually engaged in that Zoom? Like, what is the quality control in what was talked about? Because surely not every conversation between coach to player is going to be. If it's not done right, it's not a guarantee that it's going to land anything significant.
No. But then sometimes just having that conversation might be enough. I mean, who says you even have to talk about football in that conversation? It's about the connection between the coach and the athlete, the coach-athlete relationship. As long as you are helping your connection with the player, there is a benefit. And we'd like to think everything we do impacts meaningfully that player's development. But actually, maybe we just meaningfully impact their day or meaningfully impact what's happening in their lives. I mean, with my grassroots players, we had a chat, and actually, we're all quite happy to just go. We don't need to get in touch constantly. I put together another document and said, if you're interested in reading, here's some stuff I recommend. If you want to watch some videos, here's some stuff I recommend. If you want to email me, here it is. They're under 17, so they're okay. They can email me. One kid has emailed me asking me about coaching in the future. So I've had a little chat with him. But otherwise, just checked in with parents a bit and left them alone because that's what they wanted. Maybe that says something about my relationship with the players, but that's what they wanted. During this time, they were just like, no, we'll just get on with it. And I've spoken to some of the parents and they're like, they just spend most of their time sleeping and playing their games. Well, if that's what gets them through, it might not be the best thing to do, but if that's what gets people through, that's what gets people through.
Someone, one of my friends back home posted a video of our final when I was 12, 13. This is 25 years or no, 25 years ago. And I started thinking, all right, you start watching, you start thinking, right, that was May. When was our next, what did we do that summer? When was our next training session? When did we get together again with that team? Oh, it was 5 months later. Did I talk to the coach in that 5 months? No. And he's one of my favorites. He probably made the biggest impact on me as a coach. What I would be really curious, and it'll never happen. Maybe it will. Maybe someone will do it. But like, I would love to know what the players take on. Like, we almost feel as if we have to contact the players all the time, and we coach that way on the pitch. Like, we feel as if we haven't talked in 4 minutes. This session's going to go to rubbish because it hasn't been. But I don't know where I'm going with this here, but I almost think that wouldn't it be great to hear it from a player's perspective who are comfortable enough to say, like, oh, I did a Zoom every day with a team and it was miserable. I wish I would have got a bit of time,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there'll be someone who feels like that. But then I'm sure there'll be others who just think, yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
People are different. I like that someone, Anthony, we've had 3 Zoom chats and all we talked about is Pokemon, Lego, and Match Attacks. I think that's the way it should be. They're under 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course that is. That's what they're going to be interested in. Yeah, the phrase that Paul McGuinness often uses is premature professionalism. And God, asking kids to act like pros at any time is inappropriate. But asking them now, just let them be to an extent. Just let them be.
Yeah, I would be in that there, like having a 3-year-old and seeing what teachers are doing at this moment in time. And I think it depends on what level. Private school, you're getting inundated. Public school, she sent them a card, and God love her, like she did that there she just did that out of the goodness of her own heart. So we're experiencing something that I feel is it. But I think that's a mirror image of football. I think if you're in them all the time, there's a business model there as well, and that might not be. So like maybe we're not in this situation again, but maybe if we are, or maybe a dialogue amongst coaches would be what would be a healthy amount of communication to a player. And again, they're all going through different things, but it'd be nice to get a little bit of perspective on that there. And I don't work in the youth game, so I don't know, but I'm just guessing that it can't all be positive.
No, there's definitely an aspect of coaches needing to be seen to be coaching by whoever's around. It might even be from the players, and an aspect of I need to show you that I know, rather than let's see what you know. I tend to try and approach it as let's see what you know. So I've had things with the 9s and 10s futsal players where I just put up on the board, go forward. What does this mean to you? And they chucked a whole bunch of stuff out at me. I've just written down what they said, and I'm like, okay, let's go and play. Let's see if any of the things you've just said happened. And I remember doing it, and one of the kids kept coming over to me and going, we just did an overlap. I'm like, yes, you did, great. And then something, we just did, yeah, fantastic. Log it, tell me, we'll stop in 5 minutes. Tell me then, because just play for now. But I'm glad you're noticing. And then we went back, we talked about it again. They told me these things were happening. I'm like, anything else you could add? Oh, this. Okay, I'm going to add one, this. Let's go and play again. And while they were playing, I'm not saying much at all, because we're doing our talking when we stopped, and they're doing a lot of the talking. And I think, personally, I believe that that's important, that it comes from them. I think there's more impact from it coming from them. And I said about it breaking down over time if we're explicit. If it comes from them, it stays longer. And then maybe that's the next process. If this happens again and we want something in place, what do they want? How would they like it to be handled? Because they've experienced it now. So have we, obviously, but no one had experienced it before. And they might say, do you know when we had that lockdown? I wish we'd done this. And I go, okay, let's have that in the backup plan.
I think that's huge, and I think if players, it's going to be difficult because they're not going to a lot of them journal or write. But I think for a coach to actually, when they're going back on the pitch, to keep a journal of like these next few months in terms of what you did. If you took your approach where you kind of backed off a little bit, how did that impact? And if you were doing Zooms 3 times a week, did that impact it on a positive level? Because I would be fascinated by that there. I would be fascinated to see how each approach worked at every single level.
Definitely.
Murray has said there pro clubs have been working with parents and staff to support the kids. Like, I think that's great as well for because my word, it's hard being a parent in it as well, where you've now got to do your work at home and entertain kids all day.
Yeah, well, at the not the grassroots club, at the community trust where I am, we've sent out stuff to kids and to parents, and videos have been made, and they've done some webinars as well, which is a relatively recent thing. So they have sent stuff out. I just wonder again, if they're getting sent stuff left, right, and centre, is it going to be overload? Just be a bit careful about that. That's why what would they have liked? What do they want? Pro clubs is slightly different because they don't have it, and it's not going to be coming from grassroots as well. But if it's a development centre program, well, they might get it from the dev centre, the grassroots club, the school. Back off for a second. Let us get our heads around it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Peter, has been fantastic. I've put up the links to, if anyone's looking for it here, the file. If you haven't got to go to files, and you've got the PowerPoint of the social distance training session. I've also, you scroll down the chat, I've put up link for Peter's book as well, and one of them, if you find one, you find the other on Amazon very, very, very quickly. So
Amazon is currently saying that one's sold out, which isn't strictly true, but they've got an issue at the moment. If Amazon isn't working, the book depository ship worldwide, so it's worth giving that a try if you're interested.
Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. Peter, thank you so much. Maybe we'll come on again with your other study, and we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about maybe in a few months down the line what this has created or what it hasn't created in the football world. But I'd love to get you on again.
Give us a shout. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, and thanks to everyone who's stuck it out.
They've all stuck it out. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Peter. Be safe. We'll talk soon.
And you, take care. Bye.